Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Radio, artist and filmmaker Jeremy Corbell returns to the show to talk about his new film Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. Although controversy surrounds the real story behind Lazar, Jeremy explores what he learned making his film and why Bob himself has decided to tell his story one last time.
And this story was of a man who claimed to be part of a very small military program to attempt to back engineer or reverse engineer an alien propulsion system, not of this earth. He was terrified. He was being followed. Their phones were being tapped. This is real. He got raided by a multitude of agencies with full-on SWAT, dudes in ghillie suits, full black camo face masks, and guns pointed right at the center of his head, woken up out of bed. I mean, that happened to him and his wife at their house in New Mexico a number of years ago. You have never seen Bob Lazar pressured on this topic like I pressure him, period.
All that and much more. So stay tuned. The Black Vault Radio is about to begin. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey, my quest for the truth. My name is John Greenewald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenwald Jr. As always, thank you so much for making this your podcast and radio show of choice, at least to listen to for the next couple of hours or so. It's going to be a fairly exciting show again this week because I am bringing back one very popular guest, one of the most downloaded episodes of my show thus far. Mr. Jeremy Corbell, artist and filmmaker, appeared with Mr. George Knapp a few episodes ago now to speak about his film Hunt for the Skinwalker. Well, he's ending the year with another film release, this one on the very controversial Bob Lazar. Now, for those who don't know who Bob Lazar is, Area 51 is kind of on the map because of this man and Mr. George Knapp as well. George broke the story of Bob Lazar near 30 years ago now, and Bob Lazar claimed to work inside an area called S4, where he allegedly worked on reverse engineering alien spacecraft and alien propulsion systems. It's quite a story, one that obviously has a lot of controversy surrounding it. And there is a lot of questions, and we're going to get into some of that with Jeremy, see what he found out on his film. Now, I have seen it. As I said with Hunt for the Skinwalker, it is worth seeing. Jeremy's got a great editing style, and he really gets into the human emotion in his films, meaning he shows the people. He shows who's behind the story, not necessarily the story themselves. I like that element to shows. I may not believe in the story of Bob Lazar. I feel that there are certain questions that still need answering, but I think Jeremy's film does a great job tackling the story, but also getting into Bob's life and seeing Bob today, not archival footage, although of course he uses that in the documentary, but actually hearing from Bob Lazar today. So we're going to bring Jeremy on, talk about that film, see what he learned and experienced on it, and see what he found out, see what he believes. That's coming up in just a couple of minutes. You'll also notice some changes. If you listened to last episode, we dropped the TBV news segment. Well, I've received all your letters. Very exciting and encouraging to hear your reaction to me dropping that segment. These shows just have a lot of information, and they started getting really, really long. And the YouTube channel, although I don't advertise it much, I always just publicize the podcast page, became very, very popular. Here is where I need your help, however, and I hope that you can do this. With that channel starting to become popular, YouTube, I think, started paying attention to it a little bit more and took away some of the features that I have. I wasn't in trouble, so I want to make that clear. There was no copyright strikes or anything like that. But certain features are turned on when you're considered an original content creator on YouTube. Now, again, that wasn't my agenda in the beginning. I was just putting these shows on there as another avenue to listen to. But along with the shows were public domain videos that I was receiving under the Freedom of Information Act. As you all know, I archive documents, but also photos and videos. The videos I put on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, well, since I don't edit them, and that's by design, I mean, I want you to have the actual real videos that I get declassified. Since I don't edit them, they started taking the features away, just saying, hey, you're not a original content creator because you have these other videos on there. I tried to argue the fact because I'm not stealing anything. A lot of times the videos that I get declassified are not available anywhere else. Sadly, though, they didn't care. And so they took some of those features away. So again, it wasn't a being in trouble kind of situation. It's just they only have those features for original content creators. Well, it may have been a blessing in disguise. So sadly, I had a strong growing number of over 7,000 subscribers to the Black Vault channel. For not really advertising it that much, I was proud of that number. And now I've had to split the channel in two. One channel is what you may be listening to right now. And if you are listening to the show on YouTube, then make sure you're subscribed to that channel because this does not appear anywhere else. The channel name is called the Black Vault Originals. The other channel, which will still be updated, so don't unsubscribe and don't delete it from your feeds, but the Black Vault will remain. But where I need your help, I need to get those features back because I was about to launch something really exciting and YouTube was the best way for me to do it. Sadly, some of those features got taken away, again, just simply because they switched my account to just a normal, account. So I have to have only original created videos on the channel. So I started a new one. If you could help me out and go to the following address, I'd really, really appreciate it. It's www.theblackvault.com/originals. That's the easiest way for me to tell you how to get to the YouTube channel because I've set up a forward that once you go to theblackvault.com/originals, you will get forwarded to that brand new channel. Now, don't think that that is only going to have this radio show. So if you're subscribed on iTunes or one of the other many ways to subscribe to this show, don't think that that's just another way to listen to the radio show only. There is a lot of visual video content coming. I just need your help subscribing to that show and maybe listening to some of those programs on there because YouTube does watch the amount of hours that are played. And I've been excited to see in the last 2 days, quite a few hours have already been racked up under my account, but I still do need to meet their threshold. I know that's a lot of technical information you probably don't care about, but why I'm telling you that is I do need your help to build up those numbers and quickly, simply because I want to take the next step, launch some of these videos here in the next month or so, especially in the beginning part of 2019. But in order for me to do that, I just need your help to subscribe to that new channel. The radio shows, though, if you do listen on YouTube, have been removed from the regular Black Vault channel. And that is also because of a silly eBay rule that I can't repeat content on multiple channels without getting a repercussion on that. So I did have to remove it. So if you're wondering where the shows went and you think you're subscribed to the Black Vault channel, just know they got moved to a second channel. I know it's silly, sounds like another really bad step to have to go through, but sadly, it's not my rule. So I just had to adhere to YouTube. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. Theblackvault.com/originals, that will forward you over to that. Now, I don't want to waste any more time. Mr. Jeremy Corbell is coming onto the show to talk about Bob Lazar. A lot of controversy here, a lot of unanswered questions, and we'll see what his film answers and what it addresses and ultimately what he experienced making this film. Jeremy Corbell coming up. Stay tuned. In this episode's TBV Dialogues segment, I welcome back artist and filmmaker Mr. Jeremy Corbell. Now, last time we discussed the release of his film Hunt for the Skinwalker. He, along with George Knapp, explored the mysterious Skinwalker Ranch on this program, and to date, it remains one of the top downloaded programs of this show. Now, Jeremy is closing out this year with another bang, and he's releasing another film called Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. I was excited to have an advanced sneak peek at the entire documentary, and as I said with Hunt for the Skinwalker, it's incredibly well done and very much worth seeing and hearing what Bob has to say. It's why I wanted to bring Jeremy back to discuss this film and what he learned. It's important to get as much information as we can before we pass judgment on a story or a claim being made, especially since it's been quite a few years since we've really dug deep and learned something new about the story behind Bob Lazar. Jeremy, welcome back to the Black Vault Radio.
John, thanks so much for having me on again. I am so excited to be able to share this information with your audience in particular, because you absolutely have an understanding about the modern day UFO situation, which relates to what we're about to talk about. And hearing your intro, I just want to say, look, everybody, to really judge a story, you need the data. Mm-hmm. You need to be skeptical, and you need to have the data. So, this film provides a lot more data, but I am asking you to bring your skepticism, yet be open to hearing all of the data. You will never land on a real opinion if you don't listen and see and understand the information that is being presented in context, and then apply your thoughtful, critical mind. So that's the point of the film.
Yeah, and I won't blow what's in your documentary, but this is one thing that I will bring up that really resonated within me, and I hope you don't mind me doing so. You had a line in there that said, people dismiss stories like Bob Lazar, but they don't necessarily know why. Now, I'm paraphrasing that. That's not an exact quote. A lot of people will say, well, Bob's full of it. He's not telling the truth. And you turn around and say, okay, well, why is that? And a lot of people, now some will have an answer, but a lot of people will be like, well, I don't really know. It can't be true. And they dismiss it without necessarily knowing the facts. And one thing, and I'll pass it back to you to kind of lay the groundwork here, but one thing that I want to compliment you on, and this was done in Hunt for the Skinwalker, and I had brought this up to you and George then, but you did it again in this film where you really focus in on the human element to these stories, that there's human beings behind this, and that we don't just trash them and move them around on a chessboard, that there's actually people, that we have to give them at least some respect to tell their story. And if we decide that they're full of it later, then that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But you do that very, very well with these films, and I want to compliment you on that. Now, for the audience who don't fully know who Bob Lazar is, because this is a name from many years ago that has largely disappeared, tell everybody what his story is. Who is Bob Lazar, and what is he claiming?
Right. Okay, so let's do that. But first, let me comment on what you said. I appreciate you thoughtfully talking about the film and watching it. Let's just, about what you just said. Correct. When someone creates an alternate theory of reality for another individual person's life, they have the same burden of proof that they apply to other people. They must provide that proof. So if somebody decides the version of reality that's real for Bob Lazar was that he never worked at Los Alamos at the particle accelerator at the Maison facility, and in fact he was a janitor, which is something that was a meme that was absolutely fictitious and has been repeated for 30 years, and that was set forward by Stan Freeman, and it's just distasteful, and it is a Phil Class style attack on the character of an individual to create fake news and put that out for 30 years. So, look, that pisses me off because it takes ufology and it basically steps on it when we have much more thoughtful ways to approach something. So from what you just said, I would like to say, I'm glad people get to see who Bob Lazar is in my film. If you notice in my poster, he's been reduced to a pair of Coke bottle glasses, because that's what everybody remembers of him, from, kids selling chai in India that I met to, anybody here in America. People remember him through this iconic Coke bottle glasses, but his face is not there. And that's intentional, because to your point, I'm a former mixed martial athlete. It was a tactic of warfare. It is a tactic of warfare, both by agencies, intelligence agencies, by governments, and by fighters from people. It is a method of war. If you want to dismiss a message, you simply dehumanize the messenger. And this has been done to Bob Lazar for 30 years, unobstructed, unchallenged to a high degree, except for George Knapp, who for 25 years has been, fighting to get people to see the facts of the case, right? But it has been done so well. So this is the point of the film. You may no longer dehumanize the messenger, Bob Lazar. You need to hear his story and judge for yourself if you agree with his message. Now, your next question, who is Bob Lazar? How do we know him? Is that the question that you had?
Yeah, I mean, just for those, because a lot of listeners of the Black Vault Radio are not necessarily UFO enthusiasts, and they're here to learn. So, kind of give a little bit of a rough overview of what Bob Lazar's story really is.
No problem. So, look, it all started. It all started in the desert, just north of Las Vegas, in 1989. Award-winning news journalist George Knapp broke a story. And this story was of a man who claimed to be part of a very small military program to attempt to back engineer or reverse engineer an alien propulsion system, not of this earth. The core of his claims, and let's get this clear, the core of Bob Lazar's claims is that in 1989, he worked on special projects at a place called S4, which is a sub-base of Area 51, 15 or 17 miles south of Groom Lake, at a place called Papoose Lake. And at that base, there are 9, what he saw was 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that all ran off of a very unique, again, alien propulsion system. A gravity wave amplification system, not a reactionary propulsion system like everything else we have here and know here on Earth, but a field propulsion system, a system generated from amplifying gravity waves from an element called element 115 as a fuel source. That's the core of his claim, that he was tasked with attempting unsuccessfully to mimic or replicate this advanced propulsion system from another intelligent civilization, not of this earth, with earthly materials. That's what he said. That has always been what he said. He said from the beginning he cannot prove it definitively. However, you can't dismiss what he's saying. You just need to decide for yourself if it's the truth.
Now, I don't want you to speak for anyone else, but you've obviously spent a lot of time with George Knapp, and he obviously broke this story. Do you have an idea of, at the time, what convinced George, as an investigative journalist, that Bob was not just giving him a story?
Oh, I sure do. And, this is so interesting. You're right. George broke this story. The reason Area 51 is a household name is because of the Bob Lazar story. I can prove that to you in the court of law. The reason Area 51 has become a meme about UFOs and this technology, why people go there to see alien ships, all of this became so powerful and prominent within the subculture of people doing this and looking at this. It's because of Bob. And I'll tell you all the reasons why. I've kind of done a forensic analysis of this. I know exactly how it all started. But, George, your question, how did he, end up vetting Bob Lazar? And that's so important, because the original interviews that I've seen all of, where he's interviewing Bob, there are times when he chuckles with absolute, oh, this guy's got to be full of crap, It's it's amazing to see George, looking at the story from that perspective when I look at the original interviews.
Mm-hmm.
But how was George Knapp convinced? Because, you know George as well as I do. He's been a mentor to me in journalism. I know his character. He would never, the moment that he thought at any point that Bob Lazar was lying about this story, he would not be publicly defending him. He wouldn't have been publicly defending him for the last 30 years, right? He would tell the world and drop the story. Not the case. Mm-hmm. So why? All right, well, first thing George did was get a number of individuals confirmed working out at Area 51 at that time in a room with Bob Lazar to grill him, ask him questions that nobody could possibly know if they didn't land through the Janet flights at 51 at Groom Lake. There's no way he could have known the answers to these things. They were all convinced that Bob had been there, all of them, every single one of them. That's something George doesn't publicize because he can't, tell you who those sources are because mm-hmm. it's a secret military base. But he is a journalist who covers all things when it comes to this. Now, also remember, he put Bob through 4 polygraph tests. Bob passed them all. Those tests were done by Terry Tabernetti, a Los Angeles-based cop who turned polygrapher in Las Vegas, who to this day works with casinos to vet employees for theft. So master polygrapher, he believed Bob because the results showed it. And Terry Tabernetti showed those results to other polygraphers to get their ideas. So, look, that's another anecdotal thing. We can't prove beyond a shadow of doubt Bob's telling the truth. I can't prove that. But one of his friends said something really interesting to me. He says, look, if you want to know the truth about UFOs, you got to know the truth about Bob. Is Bob a honest person or is he a liar? Does he lie to his wife of 18 years who sleeps next to him every night? Does he lie to his mom? I mean, these are the way that we'll start to understand who Bob is. And you see this in my film. And then you might be able to judge a little bit better the veracity of his claims.
So George did a lot of research back then, even behind the scenes, it sounds like. When did you learn about the Bob Lazar story? Because by your posts on social network, I always enjoy, reading through what you're posting. It seems like you've known about this story of Bob Lazar for a long time, and you've been waiting for somebody to make a documentary like this, but no one ever did. So you did it. When did you learn about it?
Right. No one ever could. I mean, Bob is the most reluctant UFO messiah that you can imagine. I mean, he's a charming guy, but he does not want to be involved in the UFO situation. The only reason you continue hearing about him for 25 years is because of the hard work of George Knapp. So when did I first hear about it? Man, this is what got me interested in UFOs. Can you imagine? This is like I love chocolate bars and Willy Wonka invited me to his factory. I mean, this is like the coolest thing in the world. I get to do this personally. I am so excited to be able to share with you because my goal was to A, find out the truth about flying saucers, B, find out if Bob Lazar was telling the truth or lying, and then C, share that information in an uplifted visual medium and form of film. Mm-hmm. So if I've achieved all those goals, man, I'm happy. How I knew about Bob, 1989, heard Bob describe an alien propulsion system on the radio, a non-reactionary propulsion system, a field propulsion system. This concept of warping space-time through gravity wave amplification was so foreign. Element 115 had not been fabricated. Gravity was not confirmed to be a wave. All these things that are, anecdotal but interesting if you want to get into them, it blew my mind. Mm-hmm. So in 1989, I was 13 years old, heard this on the radio, and the script was flipped. And I like to say my curiosity was weaponized, meaning I no longer could be just a consumer of information. I was trying to figure out a way to find out the truth and contribute to the knowledge base of the topic. And that's truly how it started for me. My obsession with these things we call UFOs was hearing probably as a kid just being amazed mm-hmm. by hearing Bob Lazar on the radio and George Knapp interviewing him.
Now, obviously, Bob Lazar's name, although being legendary when it comes to the field of ufology and his story, he largely has disappeared, meaning he doesn't do the circuit anymore, if he ever did, but he doesn't do appearances. He did one at a UFO conference a couple years ago. I believe you were at that. that's kind of it. And that was a big deal. How did you get him to sit down now and tell his story 30 some odd years later?
I like to say it's my charm and personality, John.
Well, it may be, if that's what.
Okay,
if that's...
I don't think it was. So here's the deal. Let's get this straight. Let's untwist it. Bob never was on the UFO circuit.
I know. You know what? I'm going to jump in. I want to correct myself. I didn't mean it that way. I just meant that he was more active in telling his story through George Knapp, and obviously made worldwide headlines. So I do want to correct myself. I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But, some people, this is important. We cover it because people think he's profiteering off his story. It's so fascinating to me. I mean, I just want to hit a few key points because it sheds a different light on his situation, right? So check this out. When he told his story, whether you believe it or not, he told his story reluctantly and because he was fearing for his life. I have talked to a variety of people that knew him before he was Bob the UFO guy. I've talked to his friends that lived through that time period with him. He was terrified. He was being followed. Their phones were being tapped. This is real. All of that is real. Whether you believe it or not, it happened. And I can tell you all the things in detail. But additionally, he did come forward. He tried to make a tape. He made that tape because he was being asked all these questions, thousands of the same questions over and over. He thought, okay, put it on tape. I've said everything now. The world has the information and I'm done. How wrong was he about that? Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody put the story down, right? And then there's George Knapp, and he's twisting Bob's arm to come forward so that one time in 25 years that he actually went to a UFO conference to talk. That was because George Knapp pressured Bob Lazar that after 25 years, just tell your story again, man, because people are twisting it. It was a miracle. So now the fact this movie got made at all, equally miraculous. It was not easy. Bob did not ask me to make a movie on his life. I tried as hard as I could to convince him that people were twisting his story beyond recognition, that they were lying unchallenged, to the things that actually occurred in his life. They were creating an alternate reality. And I also convinced him that after 30 years, there are 2 new generations of people who maybe not only haven't heard his story, but also weren't even born yet when he told his story. And that if they get exposed to this false and fictitious version of fake news reality that people are putting out about his story, that it will be forever lost in the atmosphere of absolute, fiction. And I think, look, man, you can poke a sleeping tiger, as much as you want. At some point, that tiger's going to wake up. And I think that's what we've got now in my film. It's emotional. You have never heard Bob Lazar talk like he talks in my film, period.
Yeah, and I think that was what was the most intriguing for me, is to hear his story now and how he tells it now. And I get the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't matter if you believe him or not. It is what it is, and he doesn't care beyond that. Is that accurate? I mean, does he care if people believe him?
That is absolutely accurate, but I want to kind of adjust it a little bit. It's so funny. I understand the scrutiny that Bob has been through for the last 30 years. It has altered the way he talks. He's very careful about the words he says, very thoughtful. He tries to be, that's not his nature, but he tries to be, because people have just twisted and twisted. Yeah, look, Bob, first thing he said to me is, look, you're not doing a film on me. However, you've heard my story now personally. And he goes, look, you can believe it or not. I understand I haven't provided you all the evidence, scientifically speaking, where you can, beyond a shadow of a doubt, say, yeah, I believe his story. He goes, but don't dismiss my story based on lies. However, if you don't believe it, he goes, really, you'll do me a favor, pass it on, because this has done nothing good for my life. And that's hard for people to understand. They think, oh yeah, he this has got to be good for his life. No, he lost a marriage over this. He had financial issues because of this. He has been in New Mexico. There was a raid on his property, which you could say was or was not because of this. It was because of this.
Mm-hmm.
It was for sure. But, whatever. You don't need to believe that. My point being that, yeah, he doesn't care in one sense if you believe him personally. However, he does think that it is important that you hear his story, that you at least hear it in its real form, because there is a part of Bob Lazar deep inside that feels after all these years, he's not going to work on the projects again. He's not going to do it again. It's important that you know. It's important you know one very particular point. Yes, we've been visited. That's a big part of it. He is telling you we have been visited by an intelligent, advanced, non-human species and that we have their hardware. But what he's really passionate about is that you understand there is a physics. There is a physics and science that is very real. And we know about it. And it has not been allowed to be analyzed by the scientific community. And he feels that to be an absolute crime. He knows it's dangerous because when we talk about gravity propulsion, we are also talking about weapons. 100%. It's a game changer. Whoever gets this technology, they win. That is precisely why ATIP, that is now admitted to one of the multitude of active UFO programs, that ATIP, and it is still active, ATIP itself, okay, that program, that reactionary program, that is specifically to achieve a military advantage, to try to understand how these craft operate. Absolutely, 100%. That is about military advantage.
Yeah.
And whoever gets this technology first, it's a game changer. And they win. So Bob does feel passionate being an American and understanding that we have this, that we have it. He wants you to know that there is something being hidden from you, something big, something changing, something transforming. So it's yes and no is the answer to your question.
Does he feel, after he came out with his story and that he has secured it in the public domain and had a little security from that, does he feel that by him doing that, has that changed anything? Have there been any advancements, meaning is the government letting loose on a little bit of this information? Do they think differently? Does he see any change from his story being out there?
He avoids the UFO topic, does not look into UFOs. He is almost disinterested in general UFO pop culture. He is uneducated on it because he doesn't look at it. He would never take credit because of his story. Really, he dismisses almost anything, about the influence he has had. I was like, Bob, you gotta autograph some UFO posters for me, or I'm gonna be lynched when we, do this premiere. And he's like, but you're gonna ruin the art of the design. Why would somebody want a signature on it? He's so funny, man. He doesn't get that he's had this huge impact both on people and the UFO culture itself. I mean, he kind of gets it, but he doesn't register. So he would never be one to say, yeah, the government is looking at this differently now. If I understand your question, the government is looking at this differently now because I came forward. Look, by coming forward, if we give him the benefit of the doubt that his story is true, just for a second, just for a thought formula, right? Then, yeah, man, it worked. He came forward. He blew the whistle and he walked away, and he walked away unharmed, unphysically unharmed, right? So if we give him the benefit of the doubt, what he did worked. Now, I will argue for sure. And look, I've shared with him because Commander David Fravor, I was talking with him 2 years before the New York Times broke that story. He's a friend of mine, Commander Fravor. And, I showed Bob and told him details of the Tic Tac UFO incident, and he was fascinated with it from a technology standpoint, because what is described is surely anti-gravitic. It must be a gravity propelled craft by the way it's described by Commander Fravor, how Commander Fravor saw it move. So I guess that's a long way around kind of answering your question, which is, has the world changed because, from a governmental perspective of how the information's out because of Bob? No, we can't attribute that to Bob. However, if they were trying to keep stuff secret, it definitely put a lot of eyes on Area 51 and the topic thanks to Bob. But I think what we're seeing now is a sort of desperate critical mass attempt by the United States military or by our government or by individuals who work for the government. It's like, hey, wake up. We need to deal with this because the frequency has increased, or at least we're saying it has. And if somebody else gets this technology, and by the way, other nations are working on this and are most likely more advanced than we are on this, we better get a handle on this because, again, it's a game changer.
I'll get letters if I don't ask you about this because you brought this up a few minutes ago. I'm going to go back on it and see if you can expand on it. You had mentioned a raid in New Mexico. Can you expand on that and explain what happened? Sure.
So Bob Lazar, he works in a variety of what would be considered volatile materials. I guess that's a good way to say it. He has a scientific consulting business called United Nuclear, and they have, contracts, active contracts, military contracts, but civilian and technology contracts. However, he also has a shop or a store. It's not like you can walk in, but you can order stuff online. Mm-hmm. So it appears that Bob Lazar is under a great deal of scrutiny at all times by multiple agencies, just kind of watching and looking to see if he's going to trip up in any kind of way, right? What people don't know, and I don't know how much detail you want about that raid, the bullet point is he got raided by a multitude of agencies with full-on SWAT, dudes in ghillie suits, full black camo face masks, and guns pointed right at the center of his head, woken up out of bed. I mean, that happened to him and his wife at their house in New Mexico a number of years ago. Uncool dudes, right? Not cool. How many times can someone get raided and not be charged with anything? In order to get a raid like that, you need a warrant. In order to get a warrant, you have to have probable cause. Well, guess what? He's never been ever penalized for any time he's been raided. I'm saying any time he's been raided because we'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's the deal. Why I say he's on the radar of these agencies and they take any chance they can to poke the sleeping tiger. I never talked about this. I discovered an anti-domestic terrorism document that I believe was it was under the DIA, and it was just somehow a publication I found in the deep web, basically. And it was just going through all these, kind of local situations and who you have to look out for. And there's United Nuclear. I showed it to Bob. There's an image of his banner right there and listed as, hey, this is the kind of business we got to look out for because they sell these, elements and supplies and all sorts of stuff. So he is clearly on a radar, and we do see that with this raid in New Mexico. However, he did nothing wrong. He actually went to the appropriate organizations and let them know that people were buying strange things in strange quantities that could be used for domestic terrorism from his business. He warned them and actually worked at one time with the FBI with like a fake news truck outside his gate to catch an individual coming in to buy stuff from him that could be used for negative means. So he's like this nice dude citizen guy who's like informing the FBI and he's making sure that everything he's selling is up to code and up to date. And yet they do this raid. But the thing is, the raid was weird, man. Besides the fact Richard Doty was there, the raid was weird. Oh yeah, a little known fact.
No, that is a little known. I didn't know. What, if you don't mind me asking, what was the year of this raid?
See, only you're going to pick up on this, and only you're going to see the significance of that, right? But again, let me put it to you this way. I like Rich Doty. He's a nice guy. I mean, I talk to him once in a while. Interesting guy, man.
Yeah,
I love talking to him, and he's a nice dude. But we all know, he's done some things that are a little subversive, to say the least, right? So if you know your UFO lore, fact, he did some things that were a little bit subversive.
Yeah.
Now, so let me correct myself, actually. Very important. I'm going to Bob Lazar my comment a little bit by being extremely accurate.
Okay.
Richard Doty said he was there.
Okay.
Big difference of me saying Rich Doty was there.
I gotcha. Okay.
And I don't remember the year. You'd have to look that up.
No, and that's fine. What was there a reason? I'm just curious. Did he claim why he was
funny?
there?
I really don't want to bring him into this conversation quite yet. We're going to do it, but like I didn't mean to do that because, I have my own opinions. I mean, I like Rich. He's a nice guy. We all know what he did, but he's a nice guy. And in some way you could just say he was doing his job, right? When he was, disinforming the UFO public. However, sorry.
No, that's okay. We'll get away from the raid, but I want to ask you one last thing. Since something like this probably even made local headlines, I don't know, and I'm guessing.
Yes, it did.
Okay, so it made local headlines. Because stuff like that, when you have multiple agencies raiding someplace, I mean, we see it in Los Angeles all the time, Jeremy, as you know. But for those who don't live in an area where that happens, I mean, it makes local headlines. Yeah. Was there a story on why they went in? I mean, what was the public real reason? Yeah.
So when you look in my film, when his wife, Bob's wife, Joy, is holding up that piece of newspaper, lab something in controversy or something. I don't remember the title, but that was because of the raid. They reported on it in the newspaper. I have the newspaper here somewhere and I can look it up. Mm-hmm. I think what it boiled down to, they couldn't, I'll tell you, the real story is they told the agency people, there were a number of agencies there, and even Rich Doty, if you believe him, he was there, admits this, that it was very odd that there were agents there, that they didn't determine exactly which agency. There were multiple, though. And they were telling people to look for something small and hidden in a clamshell container, which goes along with the Lazar story. If you know his story, they were looking for something. They told everybody not to open it and that it would be hidden. And which is really weird. What they ended up kind of trying to tag him with is improper labeling on shipping, I believe, certain hazardous materials. But then they ended up, I believe they ended up just kind of dismissing it. So whatever it was, and we can look at the article and I can get the exact information. I mean, it's all out there. There's nothing hidden about it. But what you see is not what you get in that situation.
But why would you need such an army going in there for a mislabeling of a shipment? Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense to me, but am I missing something?
No, you're not missing anything. So one of my friends is a federal agent who does raids. He has made a number of comments to me in private when I've gone through the details with him about that raid. Mm-hmm. How incredibly over the top, and not even over the top, bizarre that raid was. The story doesn't end there. And all I'm going to tell you before you watch my movie, I thought, and Bob thought, and we joke about it in the film, that after 30 years, who cares what he says? After 30 years, there's probably zero monitoring of his situation. Mm-hmm. And we joked about it. Well, apparently that's not the case. And I was exposed to some very dramatic events. And they happened. What you see in my film is real. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that in depth. But I want people to see it first. I want people to experience it visually and then go from there.
You never told me what, and I'm not going to say what happened, but you never told me what happened. And I watched the film, and I will say I was surprised. So I do hope that the audience does look at that and see what you experienced doing this film and making it. Because it did make me start to wonder, what exactly is behind this story. Because I don't claim to know. Of course, I know the skepticism, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of that and how you react to some of those skeptical arguments against Bob Lazar by the end of the program. But I want to ask you about Bob's story. Let's just assume for a moment, let's create a hypothetical. He's absolutely telling the truth. There's alien spacecraft at Area 51. He wants his story out there. I would feel that the government and the military is powerful enough to stop that from happening. That they're able to, go into George Knapp's news station in Vegas and say, look, you guys are getting into some national security information, and we need you to stop. And let me tell you why I ask it this way, and it's because I've experienced it. I was working on a program, and I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, the network included, but we were in a spot, a crew was in a spot that ended up taking film footage of an area that they shouldn't have, although we were never told not to do it. We received a phone call saying, do not air that footage. So with that being said, and we didn't know that everybody was being watched. Now, that's all I'll say about that story, but that's what happened. So my question is, why would the military or the government allow Bob to tell the story and just go out there and blast it on the news stations?
Right. So you've got two options here. Okay. Yes, you are right. In the name of national security, they can ask you politely or tell you to not say or do anything they want. Period. We know that. Isn't that part of the Patriot Act? Anyway, I don't know. Just saying. Absolutely, you're right. And you got the nice version of that. I personally know, have been associated with people who have gotten the bad version of that. Okay, so here you go. I agree. They have power. Now, it's easier to do that with things that aren't as huge as alien contact. The moment you get direct government pressure about something as huge as alien contact, wow, I don't know if the Patriot Act even matters anymore. I think a journalist or a network might just run with that story and say, let the chips fall where they may. This is bigger than a government, right? So that's one way to look at it. However, let me give you another little breadcrumb here about how George Knapp began to believe Bob Lazar's story, right? After George Knapp aired the Bob Lazar story and wrestled on the ground with Bob Lazar, who tried to snatch the tape out of George's hands in the minutes before they put it in to reveal his identity, physically wrestled with him because Bob panicked. He did not want to be Bob the UFO guy. He thought that he's doing the wrong thing. This is surely going to get him killed. He's gone too far. Stop this. That happened. Okay, but we know history. George is a better wrestler. Got the tape, bigger guy, slammed it in, and you see Bob Lazar's face and name for the first time. Okay, now, one could argue that the damage had been done, and that by that moment, if you kill Bob Lazar, if you admit his employment, if you harm him, if you directly threaten him anymore, then you're validating the biggest story of all time. So that's one argument. But one way that George was compelled to understand somebody didn't want this story out. Somebody thought it was important to keep this story quiet. George was contacted by no less than 6 individuals immediately after who all had direct ties to the Nellis Range and to programs which they claimed had to do with the non-terrestrial work that was being done there. And they were willing to come forward. An example that is publicly known, because George has said it, is a stenographer. She would type on a typewriter as people were talking in some of these classified meetings dealing with non-terrestriality. She was asked to burn the ribbon of the typewriter after every session. She came forward to George at that time through his phone at his desk, at his news station. 5 other people at least also did the same, willing to go on the record to back up the Bob Lazar story with proven credentials of their employment. Every single one of them, every single one was visited by different agencies, by the way, and threatened with physical harm to themselves and to their families. And to this day, will not go on record or have a prolonged conversation with George Knapp after that. So that got George's attention because it proved two things. One, at a time period when we didn't know that all of our data is mined and put into a supercomputer that we built with taxpayer dollars, at a time when you thought journalism might be a little more sacred, at a time when we're supposed to have free press and we were idealistic about that, and maybe our government still, George Knapp realized his phones were tapped at his news agency, and they were making physical threats to contacts trying to come forward to reveal the truth and to back up Bob Lazar's story, and every single one of them were crushed. Now we take it for granted. Back then, it was infuriating to a reporter like George Knapp. That gets your attention. That gets your attention and leads credence to the Bob Lazar story.
So it sounds like he got his story out quick enough before those threats could happen. Now he's safe in the sense that now if they do something, it really does solidify him telling the truth. So that's the version of reality that I just presented to you as one option. But I mean, look, if all that's true, I mean, it makes perfect sense. That
there's another option.
Okay.
That I equally could be true. And even Bob admits it could be true, which is that he was used. Remember, they showed him some things that are undeniably true. He has no doubt that we have alien technology built by non-humans. You cannot fake what Bob Lazar touched, what he experienced, what he saw, what he felt, the tests, the experiments. You cannot fake that. So Bob is convinced. Bob knows that not only that, but we have alien bodies. I mean, he saw photographic evidence of it. He didn't have his hands on it, so he's a little bit more step back from that. But he knows we have the hardware from another civilization that is non-human. He knows that. There is no doubt, and we can go through the reasons why. But he did read wildly bizarre briefing documents. I think it was 122 of them or something like that. He skimmed through a bunch of them that said the wildest stuff. They referred to humans as containers. They talked about the influence of this extraterrestrial species on the human genome. I mean, wild stuff. And Bob is ticklish about it. He's like, look, I don't want to talk about that stuff because I don't know if any of that was true. Was it a test to see how information leaks out to the public? Did they show me real stuff, which they certainly did, and then give me a bunch of BS so that I'd see if how it leaks or if I'd leak it? He doesn't know. So the other version of reality is, look, maybe it's half and half. Maybe he's easily discredited. Mm-hmm. We know that. So maybe that was the plan all along, was to see how the public would react to this information. Maybe it was to prepare the public. Maybe it was to seed the public with information. Maybe half of it is true, half of it is false. Or maybe all of it's true, and they just did not know who they were dealing with when they're dealing with someone named Bob Lazar. And when you back him into a corner, he's going to fight back.
One thing that you brought up was the flights, that they're using this alien technology. And one thing that has always kind of intrigued me about this that I want to bring up for those who don't know, and you're going to know more of the details, but Bob took people out there to see flights at a specific time, and he knew like when they were flying something out there, right? Is that a legend or myth? If we want to go down the laundry list of things that Bob Lazar should not have known, mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's in my film, and I think no, not the whole list, but I think that more than anything else. I mean, that shows. Like, look, what he says is one thing, right? You have a lot of faith when somebody tells you something, and that's okay. I don't. He's earned my trust. But yeah, I am skeptical too, my friend John. So I hear you. No, and I didn't mean that as an insult. I just meant the words from him mean a lot. But for him to say, hey, look, if you don't want to believe me, who cares? I'll take you to go see a flight. I know that that's not how the situation took place, but that's, by me being an outsider looking out or looking into this story.
It's impressive.
It's impressive because he takes somebody out there. I don't know. Was it George? I'm not sure who.
So yeah, let me break this down for you. You're bringing up a really good point. And don't worry, you're never going to insult me. Ask me anything. The whole point of this is that we get clarity. I need to be challenged by the questions so that I can better convey what I believe or have experienced to be true. So you're bringing up a very important fact that a lot of people miss. They miss the big picture. They'll argue all day about things we cannot prove. We cannot prove the ultimate truth on Bob Lazar's claimed educations. We can't. I mean, we can argue that all day in a hamster wheel. However, that does not stop the truth that he was a physicist at Los Alamos, which I proved definitively on a multitude of occasions, and George Knapp proved it in 1989. And by the way, Bob took George Knapp. George Knapp had a camera, went through Los Alamos secure base. Together, they went through that, and I have some footage of that in my film. But let's get to your point. Very impressive moment. On 3 occasions, 3 weekends in a row, and there's reasons why Bob did it. There's absolute, definitive, human reasons why Bob did this. Why did he do it? We can talk about that. But what he did do was he took out 3 groups of people on 3 separate weekends in a row and showed them over a secret military base, not Area 51, not Groom Lake, but an obscure Papoose Lake, 15 to 17 miles south of Groom Lake, and he showed all of them. He knew the exact time, the exact location, when something that looked exactly like a flying saucer lifted up over the dry lake bed, up and did a test flight with incredible speed and maneuverability that is unlike anything that we have as far as terrestrial propulsion, reactionary propulsion that we know, and he showed them. Not only did he show them, but on one occasion, they caught it on film. Now, it's filmed that night with an old camcorder, 1989, 1990, that time period is 89, and wow, I mean, that happened. Those people he took out there on those trips, by the way, they're not all good friends anymore. They're not like super tight. Some of them don't even like each other anymore. However, the one thing they do agree on is Bob showed them a test flight of a flying saucer. Exactly when he said it would, over a secret base that people had very little knowledge of before Bob did that. So that happened. You can't get around that. You cannot dismiss that information. You cannot dismiss that witness testimony. And I've talked to the majority of people that saw it.
That, to me, is something that, like you said, is overlooked, and it's important, and it has made me reluctant to just say Bob's lying. And that to me is a very important point, because if it was once, if you told me that they went out on a Saturday night and they saw a flight, that's proof, I'd probably argue with you. If you said it happened twice, I'd be like, well, that's kind of interesting, but maybe a coincidence. 3 times, all of a sudden you start to get into a territory where you kind of have to admit he probably knew something was, going on out there, especially if there's footage to prove it, and you tracked them all down. Towards the end of the show here, I do want to, at least it would be disingenuous to the story not to talk about some points that you've touched on, but I am curious about your reactions to it. Obviously, Bob Lazar has a lot of stuff going for him to support this story. You've talked a little bit about it on this program, and obviously going in depth in the documentary. But he was largely attacked by some of the bigger names, mainly my friend Stanton Friedman, who did a lot of research back then. I think that he's kind of the root to some of the skepticism to Bob Lazar. I'm sure that there's other sources, but I bring up this one simply because you had touched upon his degrees. Now, I don't want to debate that to death, but do you mind me bringing up that is one of the major skeptical points made against Bob Lazar, that he has made the claim that he had the degree from MIT and Caltech, but was never able to offer proof. What is your experience with looking into that, and how do you address that skepticism?
Right. So look, I want you to people need to know the holes in the story. Bob's a smart guy. He could have made up a much better story if he wanted to lie about it. By the way, just between you and me, he's a really smart dude. He knows there are holes in this story that can't be filled. He has tried to prove his story. He instantly did the polygraph test. I actually asked him again, would you do it? And he's like, instantly said yes for the film. We didn't do it because they're not as like powerful, through the lens of 30 years, but, he is absolutely tried to prove his story. And I'll touch another thing, which is that, I'm not saying that I dislike Stan. I know Stan. I'm not saying I dislike him as a person. I'm saying that he absolutely unfairly treated with a double standard this Bob Lazar story and went on a personal crusade to defame him. And that I can back up with proof. This is not a personal attack. I'm not calling names. I'm saying it exactly like it is. When Richard Dolan just conveyed to me a story that when he first started in this field, he's still navigating it. Stan sat him down and tried to make sure he had the right opinion fanatically on Bob Lazar. It's like he has fanatically tried to create some sort of issue by using the same tactics that, by the way, were used against him by Phil Klass, the debunker. I mean, it is unbelievable to me. So I'm just trying, I don't want to, smack your friend around who's in retirement, right? But I'm just saying to you, I have to say it as it is, John. I need to tell it like I see it, okay?
Yeah.
And the way we got these fake news memes, that Bob Lazar was a janitor at Los Alamos, that's because of Stan. The moment I brought a new witness out, and I did, Dr. Robert Krangel, bona fide scientist working at these secure facilities at Los Alamos at the exact time as Bob Lazar, right? And I've proven that. I have all his documents, okay? He remembers Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar, the physicist at Los Alamos. Stan cherry-picked a sentence out of the entire recorded, session with Dr. Krangel and said, oh, he just said he's a physicist because of his pocket protector. Are you kidding me? Are you Phil Klass? Are you kidding me? You are intentionally twisting and deforming the truth to try to propagate an agenda of yours, and that is shameful.
Now,
and so
wouldn't this help, though? And a genuine question here. Wouldn't it, if Bob Lazar is telling the truth, wouldn't that help not only Stan Friedman, but those that are, writing the books and doing research and looking for the validation behind, let's say, something like an MJ-12 document, the government has knowledge. Wouldn't it help him?
Yeah, I really don't get it. It's like a personal mission. But it's not just him. Let's get off of him. Let's talk about criticism altogether. It's not just him. Yeah. So with the education, this is the number one thing that his detractors bring up. And I get it. You will see in my film, you have never seen Bob Lazar pressured on this topic like I pressure him, period. Have you? I mean, in the film, I go after this. I go after this. So look, let's get to the core of this. What is this about? When people try to bring up, well, was he educated at MIT and Caltech or was he not? And by the way, there are two people that George Knack talked with that used to drop him off at Caltech before he was Bob the UFO guy. So, he was taking classes there. I don't know what degrees he had, but unless he was lying back then trying to prepare for his big UFO scam, he was going to classes at Caltech. Yeah. So, look, I can't prove his education. I think his best credentials that he's ever given me is simply his ability. But other than that, here's the deal. People just want to know. Why do they ask that question, John? They ask that question because it's glaring, because they want to know something. What do they want to know? They want to know, at his core, is Bob Lazar a liar or is he not? It's as simple as that. They want to know if Bob Lazar should be trusted about his story on aliens. I mean, that's what they want to know. So, again, like one of his friends says, if you want to know the truth about UFOs, you got to know the truth about Bob. Is he an honest guy or is he a lying guy? So part of the way to do that is to see the people around him, because anybody that is a charlatan or a con man, the closer you get to the people that they have had contact with in their life, the more that's revealed typically, because they've burned people. It's the opposite with Bob Lazar. The people closest to him believe him more. Because they start to know who he is. So my contention is, I really don't care. I've tried to prove the school thing. Bob has tried to help me prove the school thing. I have not been able to. George wasn't able to. It's been 30 years. So I don't care if he was homeschooled at this point. I care if he worked on flying saucers. Yeah. So I'm willing.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm willing to accept the worst case scenario on that. although I don't think it's true.
Yeah.
I'm willing to accept whatever you want to say. The worst case scenario is that, okay, he lied about his degrees. Okay, that's not, I don't believe that to be true from the evidence that I've personally seen and people I've talked with that dropped him off at school, that kind of thing. But whatever, I am willing to accept that if we'll just get past it to go to the more important part, which is if he worked at Los Alamos in scientific capacity as a physicist when he said he did, which I have validated, which George Knapp before me had validated, that George Knapp went with him there, that we know that to be true. We've talked to other employees there. We've talked to people that worked with him off the record. I talked to somebody from Area 52 that absolutely worked there, knew Bob from Los Alamos, and that he worked there as a physicist. So I've proved it 100 ways from Sunday for me personally. Mm-hmm. If Bob Lazar worked there on scientific capacity as a physicist at Los Alamos, it then makes sense that he did end up meeting Ed Teller the next day after his article about him and his jet car was in the Los Alamos Monitor, the newspaper in Los Alamos. And by the way, I talked to the guy that wrote that article, and sure enough, it all checks out. He did interview Bob, did do the story. Bob was a physicist, and the next day he did a story on Ed Teller, and absolutely, Bob's picture was on the front of the magazine when Ed Teller was giving that lecture, and that he is pretty sure that they ended up meeting each other because it all makes sense and checks out. So then it makes sense that Bob Lazar might have been picked up and through EG&G gotten a job out at the test site. And that is also backed up when he had a little run-in with the law for what they call pandering, when he was installed security cameras into a brothel and that sort of thing. He was hit, taken to court, and that was the time to lie. That was the time, that was the time to come clean and not lie, because he was looking at jail time. But in fact, no, he just told him the story just like it was. And the judge himself and Congressman Bill Bray on his behalf tried to get the base to get his records. And they didn't say Bob Lazar never worked here. They didn't say we have no employment records of Bob Lazar. They said, you don't have a need to know. And that was something for Congressman Bill Bray, and that was something for the judge. And in fact, the judge goes off on a rant about it. This is the weirdest thing he'd ever seen. So in my opinion, I would say the education issue, you should look into it, and you should be skeptical. But you should also look at how much value and importance that has on the entirety of the evidence to the Bob Lazar case.
I think people are just stuck on that. Like you said, it's like one of the biggest skeptical reactions to the story. And in my opinion, I'm guessing that that's just because it goes to the core of, is he being honest and so on. I would think, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, if he's got went to MIT, went to Caltech, graduated, that he would be able to show you some family photos, mom taking a picture on graduation day or something like that. Were you able to get that, or did you leave that alone and just kind of move on?
Right. So at some point when I realized that, if I made a whole movie about trying to prove to you if Bob Lazar has degrees or not, that movie would be boring as hell.
I
so
gotcha.
Look, I and there is a very precise reason why a lot of this, would make sense to you if you knew Bob, right? So he gave me complete access to every videotape, every photograph, every person in contact in his cell phone. He was very open with me about everything. He didn't hide anything. He couldn't hide anything. I mean, there I am 24/7 with a camera, in his face, weeks at a time, or, over a week at each time I went out to do filmings that he came out to me. I mean, total transparency, total openness. So there is, one answer to that is sad, but I will tell you it because it is rarely said. George has said it before, but I'll say it again, which is, if we're going to get stuck on that and you want an explanation, sadly, Bob did have a wife when he worked and lived at Los Alamos named Carol, and Carol took her own life when Bob was out of town. At one time, she had terminal cancer, and she knew that the relationship was ending in a number of ways, and Bob was that was painful for Bob. That the feeling that someone had to do that, someone that you loved had to do that, and he literally never went back to pick up even expensive equipment that he had in Los Alamos. So as far as, pictures or records or all this stuff from the past, there's a lot of it, but, like his degree that, he said he had, would have burned up. But again, not burned up. It would have not been retrieved. So that's one way to explain the situation. However, to me, that's not really a great way to explain it.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, I should just be able to call Caltech, which I did. And the last person to graduate with the last name Lazar was actually in, I think 90 something. So we cannot prove his schooling. It's not in their system. I had the girl recently try to dig it up digitally, and that's what I was told. I think it was 1990 something was the last time somebody graduated as an alumni with the last name Lazar. So can't prove that story. No, he did go to classes there. I mean, or at least I know he was being dropped off and picked up from there on a multitude of times. But yeah, that is a point of contention. I get it. Go for it. Look at it. Choose your worst answer that is the most negative for Lazar, and then step back and decide, because you can't prove his degrees, does that mean that what he's saying about saucers is a lie? And you decide how much, and then that's up to you, man. I'm not going to tell you how much weight to put on it. If you think a lot of weight should go on it there, good on you. Do your thing. Personally, I'm far past that.
I gotcha. Well, let me ask you this last question, and I know you're a busy guy right now. You got a lot of interviews. I appreciate your time today. My last question for you is how the Bob Lazar story ultimately fits into today. You brought up ATIP a little bit earlier and the secret Pentagon UFO study, obviously something that I have looked in a lot myself. I'm very intrigued by it to see what the real story is behind it. It sounds like if you believe in one, that you may not necessarily be able to believe in the other. And the reason I say that is, let's say Bob Lazar is 100% genuine, alien craft for at least 30 years. They reversed engineered it. They're testing them. They're flying them. We know they're there. There's bodies. All of that is true and solidified, and that's what the government knows. Why would decades later they would start researching the phenomenon again? And it kind of, for me, is a little contradictory.
I love it, but I think you're playing a little devil's advocate here, because I think you know better than this, John. I mean, you do actually think about it for a second, right? You have experienced more than anybody the compartmentalization that has gone on with programs within the United States government. I mean, they're wasting money getting two competitors to work on the same thing because they want to see who wins, right? So they don't tell each other, and then they're like, oh, let's see what they come up with. Let's see what they come up with. So you know better than anybody that it is absolutely not contradictory to say we've got, program A, B, and C, and D running here for a long time doing this, and then we have E, F, G, and H program over here on the right hand doing this, and of course they don't know about each other. And by the way, these ones on the right hand side, F, G, H, all those, we're telling everybody that they started, recently, because that's where that recent funding came from. But in fact, they have been going on for a much, much longer time. But to prove that's another thing, but I'm telling you that's true. So here's the deal. It's not contradictory at all. And I think upon reflection, we can all agree upon that in the history of the way special projects works, it is absolutely in character to have programs completely unknowledgeable of one another or even their associations. And so I disagree that we can't have one without the other. They are not mutually exclusive, in my personal opinion. But to talk to, and thank you for letting me, rant here, but to to take up your question again about why is this important now? Because I think we're not in a disagreement. We're all agreeing this is wild, this is cool, we should look at it, we should learn about it, we should be skeptical, but we should understand it. That's what you want, that's what I want, that's what your audience wants. My contention is that for the last 3 decades, it is true that Bob Lazar's critics have been holding the microphone. They have gone unchallenged, largely because Bob hasn't made a point to challenge him. George Knapp has been the only one that's been talking in the mic back alone for 25 plus years. But we're taking the mic back. And that's exactly what we're going to do at this world premiere on December 3rd. And from there on, people are no longer going to be unopposed when they make up and fabricate fake news about the Bob Lazar story. Now, why do I care? I care because as a journalist, I'm taking a stand now. I'm taking a stand that I believe Bob. Not only that, but I think the evidence I've brought forward, I think will alter the landscape of the debate to the point where you need to reconsider if you believe him. I'm not asking you to believe him. I'm not telling you to believe him. I am simply asking you to evaluate the information and do so intelligently and with critical mind and see where you land, but do not evaluate fake information and fake news about the Bob Lazar story. And the last point I want to make why this is important now, because we live in a different world, John. We live in a world now where people know that the United States government was lying to us since 1969, saying that they no longer study UFOs. They at least know that there was a reactionary program called ATIP that existed, what they say is for a very short amount of time, which isn't true. But we know that to be true. The U.S. government has been studying UFOs. And I will tell you again, personally, I know for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 100% there are multiple active UFO programs that deal with different topics within the United States military and the intelligence community. That is fact. Take my words for whatever value that you can without proof and evidence right now, okay? But it is important now to see the Bob Lazar case in the light of current events. So it couldn't be a better time to be having a world premiere for the film on the 3rd. It couldn't be a better time for the world to see the Bob Lazar film dropping on December 4th. And look, man, something we haven't talked about, John, it's kind of cool. We have Mickey Rourke narrating my film.
I wanted to bring that up and I forgot to do it in the beginning, but very, very cool on that, by the way.
And why it's cool is this. I mean, I love Mickey. He's a friend. Occasionally he tries to stab me with a stiletto knife in the ribs. That's another story. Anyway, he's a friend. and the thing about him is that he has really given his voice for us, the UFO fanatics, the UFO field. His voice has power. It carries weight. There's going to be a larger UFO community now. There has never been a film that has had a narrator of this gravitas, that has been visually in this form. If you name it, I'll give it credit. There hasn't been one. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not bragging. I am confessing. I worked hard. I spent money, my money. I tried to give you something you have never seen before, and I have achieved that. So having Mickey Rourke narrate this film opens our audience of people interested in the UFO topic to the millions. This is going to reach people who have never heard the Lazar story, who never thought about UFOs, and that is so good for us. John, you got inspired. You created the Black Vault. You started going down a very specific path to get the truth out to people about this and other stuff. You know how many kids there are out there who are going to do something just like what you've done? And they're going to do it better than you and better than me. They're going to be filmmakers inspired. They're going to come out and make better films than mine about UFOs. So this is the point. Having someone like Mickey, it's like a beacon. And it tells people it's okay to be a rebel and think outside the box. I am so grateful for that little thing that Mickey Rourke did by narrating my film.
Well, you should brag about it because it's very cool. And his voice really fits the show. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times you hear a narrator and they got a great voice, but it doesn't fit the theme or it doesn't even matter. This actually really gives that emotion to what you're talking about and what Bob Lazar's story really is. Brag about it, man, because it's very, very cool. Mickey Rourke being the narrator of this. The film is Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. It gets released to the world December 3rd. You've got the premiere in Los Angeles. Are tickets still available?
Yeah, actually, we unleashed a little bit more. That was keeping an area, non-ticketed. But yeah, if you hear this broadcast before Monday, December 3rd, if you jump online, just go to my website, extraordinarybeliefs.com. There will be a pop-up. Click it. That goes right to the tickets. And yes, you can still grab tickets. We are going to sell out. The trajectory of the sales shows me we're going to sell out. This is the weekend to get the tickets ASAP. So if this drops, John, before December 3rd, yes, they can get tickets and they can come to the...
Yeah, no, it definitely will. Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. Check out Jeremy's website and get a hold of those tickets and advance your copy because you get a ton of of special content, extra features when you do so. Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, www.extraordinarybeliefs.com. Jeremy, it's always a pleasure to have you on, man. You're coming back. I'm sure we could talk for many more hours on some of this, and we'll give a little bit of time for people to see what you experienced making this film, because again, I was not quite expecting not only what had happened, but also the way you told the story, which was very well done. Highly recommend everyone to watch this and get the information before you pass judgment. Like Jeremy said, doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Just get the information before you make up your mind. But Jeremy, thank you so much, man. You're welcome back anytime you'd like.
Thank you. I think we have a longer conversation to have when people have the data and information from my film in their minds. So after they watch it, you and I should talk again, and we should go into really difficult questions about what you see in the movie. I do want to make sure to say two things so that people know it. They don't crucify for me it later, which is that to get the most bonus materials, you need to buy on iTunes. iTunes has the most bonus materials, and the bonus materials are important. It's a lot of very in-depth information that was not put into the film because of the timeline and scope of a movie. So that's where you get the most. Second most is Vimeo, and then on from there. Some don't have bonus materials, some purchase platforms. The other thing, I want to engage everybody that's interested live on stage December 3rd, about 9:30 p.m. Bob Lazar will be taking questions via hashtag Bob Lazar on Twitter or Instagram. As they come in on stage, I'm going to be feeding them to Bob for answers so the whole world can participate in a live Q&A with Bob Lazar by hashtag Bob Lazar, Instagram or Twitter. And I hope that helps. John, thank you so much for having me on. You run an excellent show. You have excellent questions, and you are informed on the topic. I hope your fans appreciate you because I appreciate the show.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. From you, that does mean a lot to me, and I appreciate that. I have always wanted to give everyone a fair shake here, including all the stories that come along with everybody's research, and that's why I wanted to bring you back to talk about Bob Lazar, because, look, I don't know what to think of it. I've got, concerns and questions, and they'll probably never be answered ultimately, and I think you know that some of these things we just may never ultimately have an answer to, but I do appreciate you taking the time telling us about the film and your experience. I do hope everybody watches it, because some of those elements in there, we just wouldn't do it justice trying to banter about it on the radio, at least for now. Once people take a look at it, absolutely you're coming back. Absolutely we'll have a much grander discussion about what happened with your experiences making the film and with Bob and so on. So thank you so much for that. Although that concludes my interview with Jeremy Corbell, don't go away. A brand new batch of documents just got uploaded to the Black Vault, and one in particular highlights exactly why you just can't believe everything you hear. That's coming up on TBV Unredacted. On this episode's TBV Unredacted, I want to talk about one document in particular, but before I do, I believe that this story deserves a little bit of context. Now, for you longtime listeners to the Black Vault Radio, you will have heard this story kind of unfold here in the last quite a few episodes over the course of quite a few months. I have updated you all on this. It's actually a fight that goes back to the late 1990s, if you can believe it, and really kicked up almost 3 years ago, where I have been literally fighting with the CIA to understand my point of view. Now, here's the context. This surrounds the MKUltra mind control and ultimately the documents they have on behavioral modification. Now, here's some of the context. Back in the late 1990s, I, along with quite a few other people, were requesting information with the use of the FOIA for all MKUltra and mind control related documents. It took years for the CIA to finally release everything. And in 2004, the CIA finally did that. They released a 4 CD-ROM set of everything that they have on mind control, MKUltra, and everything related to that very dark history of theirs, where they were conducting tests with LSD and hypnosis, ultimately led to the death of Dr. Frank Olson, one of the CIA research scientists, which is an amazing story in itself. I have reached out to Dr. Olson's son, who is still around, talking about his dad and what happened to him. I don't know if my letters are being received or if I've updated contact information. He and I chatted years ago, but I'd love to bring him on this program because it is really an amazing story. But that being said, MKUltra is just a very dark history to the CIA. So for anybody who has done a FOIA request related to MKUltra mind control, the CIA will sell you this 4 CD-ROM set. It combines about 30,000 pages of material that they claim is 100% of the MKUltra collection. Now, my tie to this story goes back to 2004 because the Black Vault was about 8 years old at that point, if you can believe it. It started in 96. And I was one of the first, if not the first, I believe it was the first place on the internet, in the entire planet, to have the entire MKUltra collection on the internet. I just dumped all 4 CD-ROMs onto the internet. Now, since then, it's been copied and requested by other requesters and, put online, and there's a few mirrors. But if you search around, you can kind of see the oldest references to the Black Vault for this collection. Well, fast forward now to 2016. According to the CIA, these 4 CD-ROMs were everything that survived of MKUltra, and they offered a bibliography index of all the documents. So it was supposed to serve as kind of a companion to what was on the CDs, broken down by document number and title, the date, the publication date, and how many pages were in this particular document. So you would go through and, see 26-page document, and it would tell you 70-page document, and it would tell you what it was, and it would break that down. And that was supposed to be a companion piece. What is interesting about this is that I had never done this, but in 2016, somebody reached out to me by the name of Oscar Diggs. He gets all the credit for this. He went through that index of documents and cross-referenced the index of what I was told. You could read this. This is the important part. I was told by the CIA everything was on there. Everything on this index was on the CD-ROM. So again, it served as an index. You can't get away from that. It's kind of plain as day. I have the letter online. You can check it out. It's all linked in the show notes, www.theblackvault.com/show notes, so you can kind of follow along. So what he did was he meticulously went through line by line, matching up what's on the CD, what's on the index, figuring out what was there and what wasn't. And he compiled a list of 308, possibly 309 documents, with an additional 19 documents that were missing pages. Now, I did not know this at the time, but I filed the FOIA request in 2016 and began my fight for these missing documents. To my surprise, because I thought it was just going to be as easy as here's all of the ID numbers for the documents that are missing and the ID numbers of the documents that are missing pages. I just thought that they would turn around and go, okay, here you go, simply because the collection was incomplete. Now, one thing I didn't mention, I paid for those CD-ROMs, and that's going to be key here in the next few minutes. But I paid money for those CD-ROMs, which means I purchased what they told me was the entire set of MKUltra related documents. Well, Oscar Diggs comes along, creates an index of missing documents and ones with missing pages, and I tried to get them. To my surprise, the CIA says, nope, all of those are on the CD-ROM. Through multiple letters and phone calls, the CIA literally pushed back and said, no, all of them are on the CD-ROMs. Now, one gentleman I did speak with who was very, very nice, no complaints. He said over the telephone, hey, if there were MK Ultra related documents that are not on the CDs, then yes, we supply them to you for free because you paid for them already. So if there was something that was missing or, not there, but it was supposed to be, of course, you are supplied that at no charge. So I had created this list. And so then when they were pushing back, I'm thinking, okay, even though I spot checked Oscar Diggs' work, which was excellent, and it looked all lined up, I wanted to make sure he wasn't duping me over anything. I didn't sit down and cross-reference the hundreds that he had compiled. I just kind of spot checked him to make sure. I mean, what's the point? He was an honest person. It checked out. So I had to sit down and go through the list again and figure out, was it really 100% accurate? And the short of it is, yes, it was. So I went through and double and triple checked that none of those documents were there. I go back to the CIA. The CIA says, nope, they're there. So I had to create a 97-page fax. 97 pages of a breakdown of all 4 CD-ROMs, all of the file paths, or the breakdown of the CD-ROM by the folder, by the file name, and so on, to prove to them, beyond any shadow of a doubt, those documents were missing. What happens? They go, oh, well, now, and by the way, this has gone on for months and at this point probably over a year. They say, no, you know what? You're right, but you were never supposed to get those documents in the first place. Now, let me remind you, they all come from an index that I was told by the CIA with CIA letterhead that those were documents that were on these CD-ROMs. They obviously were not. They argued that they were. I said they weren't. They said, prove it. I did. Now they change the story and say, nope, you weren't supposed to get them anyway, because they deal with behavioral modification. Now, apparently the behavioral modification documents are different than MK Ultra. They said that never fit into the scope of my late 90s request, and they said I had to pay for them. So now the charge was about $420, $430, somewhere around there. I don't have the exact total in front of me, but that was roughly what it was. They said you had to pay for it. So I tried to get a fee waiver, was denied. That's where the crowdfunding campaign came in. You've probably recalled that from a previous episode. That was covered by Newsweek, Vice News, got the money, and I requested the 4,358 documents that they said existed. Not MK Ultra related. All, however, were on behavioral modification, and if I needed them, wanted them, I needed to pay for it. And so I did. Wrote the check. 2.5 months go by. 2.5 months, and I got a box in the mail. Now, I've been waiting for these 4,358 pages to come along. And when I got the box from the CIA, it was big enough to know that it was probably not something they were sending me for free, because I have multiple requests with them right now. So I knew that it had to be this, but I knew it wasn't big enough to handle 4,358 pages. So I opened it up, and to my surprise, the top of the stack was my check. They sent it back to me. They never cashed it. They sent it back to me. The letter stated that they had found that some of the documents that they, again, said were not related to MK Ultra, about 800 pages were. They printed those out. They gave them to me for free. And then the number changed on behavioral modification documents. The 4,358 pages then turned into 2,316. Now, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. If the 800 pages of MK Ultra material was in that original number, meaning 4,358 they said were behavioral modification documents, not MK Ultra, I called their bluff, paid, and they go, look, this is not good. Let's just go ahead and give them the 800 pages. Let's say that that's part of that number. That still means that 1,245 pages just vanished. Whether they be about mind control or MK Ultra or behavioral modification or whatever, 1,245 pages vanished. If the documents did not come from that number, then the number of pages that just vanished was closer to 2,000. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, just saying 1,245 pages just vanished. What happened to them? I don't know. They sent my original check back for the $400 and whatever it was. And then they said, no, now you got to submit one for $220, roughly. Well, if I paid the $400 plus, why are they thinking that I won't pay the $200? In my opinion, I think it's just to start the process over. And I'm really frustrated at this point because not only did pages disappear, but the CIA, although they have a FOIA hotline, you can never ask for your FOIA case officer because they won't tell you who it is. The guy that got on the phone and really kind of pushed back to me, and sorry, guys, my friends at the CIA, but customer service is not the number one aim of some of these phone calls. Now, there is a gentleman there who is incredibly nice. I had multiple conversations with him, and it was nice. Like, I wish everybody was like that. I'm not going to call him out by name, but he gave me his name. This other one would not. He was, from what I was told, the FOIA case officer. So now I got vanishing pages, another start over of writing a check. So I voided the one check and submitted another. And I asked them in the letter, out of respect, I've waited 2.5 months for you guys not to cash my check and not to process my request. I'm hoping that you guys will at least expedite a response. Now, I want to be fair here and say it kind of seems like they did, because it only took about a month or so for them to give me the 2,316 pages. So summarizing now up until this point, all of these pages, despite the missing 2,316, should all be about behavioral modification. That's why I had to pay for them, and that's what I was told. When I opened the box, pretty excited to see this. For those that follow the Black Vault on social media, you'll see that I sent out a picture of the box. Pretty sizable, enough to hold a couple thousand pages. The biggest document on the stack, in the stack, was rubber banded and was, I didn't know this when I opened the box. I'm not this good at the page counts, but it was 821 pages. It's document C000-17440. This is the one I'm going to highlight. Out of the 2,316 pages, this 821-page document holding that 17440 number, I'll give you one guess on what it was about. MK Ultra, specifically. On nearly every page, it was listed MK Ultra. There was no getting around the fact that this was MK Ultra related material. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, because I had to pay for it. In fact, I paid $82.10 for that one specific document that they fought for years. It was that the CIA fought for years, saying that they were not any more MK Ultra related material. Now, granted, they gave me the 800 pages about a month earlier, totally different than this one document. But that was supposed to be then everything on that one. That was supposed to be everything on MK Ultra. And this was supposed to be non-MK Ultra material. And why I'm profiling this document is to show the ridiculousness of what we have to go through as FOIA requesters. I'm not trying to be a nuisance to the government. I pay taxes. I pay way too much taxes every year. And as a taxpayer, this is a law and a right afforded to me. In fact, you don't even have to be a U.S. taxpayer. You can live anywhere in the globe to use the Freedom of Information Act. But this is my right. I'm not trying to be a nuisance to them, and yet this is what we have to go through. This specific document, if that story is not bad enough for you, this particular document, 821 pages, it happens to actually be on the original CD-ROMs. Here's the catch. It's about half the file size. What that means is that the original CD-ROM that has been touted literally for 15 plus years as the complete collection is not. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages that are missing from that the CIA claims is complete, but it is not. Is this an oversight? Quite possibly. I will not say that this is malicious. What I will say, however, is that as investigators and researchers such as myself, such as Oscar Diggs and anybody else who may have put this connection together, we're not dishonest people. We're researchers. And for them to fight us, like literally fight for years, to drag this on for years, for me to try and prove this, and then take the time and for me to create a 97-page fax to prove that I wasn't making it up, that's ridiculous. We should get some kind of benefit of the doubt that we are not making stuff up and trying to be a problem to them. They are there getting paid to do let me rephrase that. They're there getting paid by the American people, by me, by those that are in America that are paying their taxes. That's who's paying their paycheck. And yet they won't even believe the people when they say something, that they'll make them go years without actually believing them. And then when somebody proves what they're saying is actually correct, they just simply change their tune. They just simply change the narrative. They change the facts. They become morphed. How does all of that happen? And then, to make matters worse, you pay the money for something that you were told is not on MK Ultra, it's on something else, and then you get the biggest document in the stack. By far, it's the biggest one. And it's all about MK Ultra. That's more than 35%. 35% of that document release was MK Ultra related. It was a release that said by the CIA to not have any MK Ultra material in it. That's utterly ridiculous. So again, that document C00017440, definitely worth checking out. It's a financial record, so you get a lot of canceled checks and breakdowns and financials. Some of it may not seem important. What is, though, read between the lines a little bit. Look at what they were buying. From artwork to things to put on the wall to decorate rooms. Know what MK Ultra was all about and the experiments that they undertook on people without their knowledge. You can see a breakdown of some of these items that were being put in these rooms. They were making up scenarios and places for people to go. So they didn't know that it was some kind of government secret operation, but in reality it was. They were taking people without their knowledge, not only here in America, but overseas. MK Delta, MK Naomi, all of these different projects that we learned about all have documents that have been destroyed. This is the remaining history, which is what I have fought for years and years to get. Finally, it is declassified, and we've proven now with this release that what they have said is complete is not. These thousands of pages that are just going online now here in the last few days from the recording of this program serves as a testament to how much is there that we've never seen. Maybe in a future episode, I'll really break down some of the importance behind these behavioral modification documents. So getting away from MK Ultra, getting into the behavioral modification research, I want you to know that a lot of these, I haven't gone through the hundreds one by one yet, but the ones that I've just kind of picked at random and tried to find on the CIA's CREST database, which is their online database of declassified documents, they're not there. I tried to find any references to them anywhere in some of the bigger resources for this type of material and Google and any way I could think about searching. They're not there. I don't think the majority, and quite possibly all of these documents, have ever seen the light of day, that they've ever been in the public domain. It looks like their classification on many levels was downgraded decades ago, meaning the CIA may have declassified portions of these documents before. The problem is it doesn't matter if something is declassified. If it sits on the shelves of the government agency for decades and never gets sent to FOIA requesters because, well, you're telling them that they're getting a complete collection, which is not complete, they will sit there for decades, quite possibly indefinitely, until people fight for them. I hope more people get on board with looking at the documents and seeing what they are and putting these connections together like Oscar Diggs did, because without his help, without his eye of doing this, I don't think I would have ever caught that. I in 2004 just kind of took the CIA at their word that served as an index. I never thought of going through the, hundreds and hundreds of documents and matching up the numbers to see if it was complete. I made the wrong decision to think that they were being honest with me. That's a shame, and that was a mistake on my part. Probably not one I'll make again. So thanks to Oscar Diggs for really helping me realize that, and thank you all for listening. Because this is an important story, and one that I hope you take a look at some of those documents and see how incredible they really are. So thank you so much for listening. I am John Greenwald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time right here on the Black Vault Radio.